The Electoral College, an outdated system needing to be abolished, or a stroke of Republican genius that has withstood the test of time? I'll break down the Electoral College in this episode of The Discussion. The concept of the Electoral College can be found in Article 2 of the United States Constitution. How does the Electoral College work? First, the president is not chosen by the total number of votes that are cast, which is also known as the popular vote, but instead he or she is chosen by 538 electors. These electors are people who are chosen through various methods depending on how the election laws are for each state. How electors are chosen is up to each political party. Every state is granted electoral votes based on the total number of representatives plus 2 senators. So for example, in the state where I live in, Florida, we have 27 representatives and 2 senators. This gives us a total of 29 electoral votes in a presidential election. In 48 states, the winner of the state's popular vote receives the totality of the state's electoral vote. This is known as a winner-take-all state. This means that if a candidate gets a plurality of the votes in let's say New York, that candidate will get all 29 of New York's electoral votes. Maine and Nebraska, they allocate their electoral votes differently, where both candidates can potentially receive a portion of the state's electoral votes. In order to win the election, a candidate needs to get a majority of the Electoral College, or 270 total electoral votes. This is why on Election Day, you will see somewhere on the screen of your favorite news network, Race to 270. So why did the Founding Fathers create the Electoral College? There are 2 primary reasons that the Electoral College was established. The first is that the framers of the Constitution were actually opposed to direct democracy. They understood that pure democracies of the past had been relegated to the ash heap of history. This was because in most cases, a large number of people who had a common interest could use their majority power to oppress the opposing minority. This is what Alexis de Tocqueville, an early French political scientist, described as tyranny of the majority. This is why we have a republic in the United States and not a democracy. Think of it this way. The 5 most populous states in the country make up almost 40% of the nation's population. If we lived in a pure democracy, those 5 states would have an extraordinary amount of power, as they alone would almost make up a majority, even though there are 45 other states in the Union. If the presidency was won through a popular vote, a candidate would only have to spend time in the most populous cities and states and ignore the rest of the country, as he or she just sits around and rakes in the votes by just hanging out in those populated areas. A candidate would never spend time in states like Virginia, New Mexico, Nevada, Arizona, Colorado. It would be a waste of their time. Because of the Electoral College, a candidate would be wise to visit as many states as possible to earn the necessary votes to reach the magic 270. The second reason for the Electoral College is that the Founding Fathers understood that voters can not be relied upon to be an informed electorate. They understood that this could lead to voters electing a president that is not suited or capable to hold the highest office in the world. By creating the Electoral College, this added a secondary layer of protection against unqualified and potentially harmful individuals getting elected as president. So here are some questions that I think you may have about the Electoral College. One question would be, isn't the popular vote a purer form of democracy? Well, this is exactly what the framers of the Constitution wanted to guard against, as I mentioned earlier. They knew that a pure democracy could cause a majority faction to potentially subject the minority and bend them to their will. Another question might be, you say that the Electoral College forces candidates to visit states they would otherwise ignore, but don't presidential candidates just visit those so-called swing states anyway and forget all about the other states that are considered safe? This is actually true. Many candidates spend a disproportionate amount of time in swing states. However, the states that are considered toss-up states, that changes constantly with each presidential election. Believe it or not, California was once considered a swing state, and Texas at one time was solid Democrat, and many Democrats today actually believe that it can go Democrat once again. The electorate of the states and the views of the residents of each state, it's constantly changing. This means that states that are in play today might not be in 12 or 20 years down the road, and those that are solid red or blue may be the states that candidates are fighting for in the future. Here's another question. Don't states with a small number of electoral votes get ignored anyway? Sometimes these states are not given much attention. However, if a candidate knew that a state like Wyoming or Delaware was a toss-up and could be the key to a narrow victory, you better believe that that candidate would fight for those 3 electoral votes. Another question you might say is, or ask is, if you're a Democrat in a red state or a Republican in a blue state, does this system make you feel as though your vote doesn't really matter? That's actually a really good question. Unfortunately, this is one of the negatives of the Electoral College. There are plenty of Republicans in California and Democrats in Alabama that don't vote in presidential elections because they feel as though their vote doesn't matter because of the state's partisan leaning. In light of this, I actually think that the Electoral College should be changed slightly. Nebraska and Maine award 2 electoral votes to the state's popular vote winner, but the remainder of the electoral votes are dispersed to the candidate who wins each congressional district. This would remove that whole winner-take-all system and allow the voters of each state more representation in presidential elections. This also might help with voter turnout because voters would feel as though their vote actually could make a difference, particularly in solid red or blue states. The concept of the Electoral College has recently come under attack. With an election closing in over the next couple of weeks, this discussion will be rehashed as to whether or not the Electoral College should still be in place today. What I do know is that there is a reason that America is the oldest constitutional republic in the world, and that our system, for better or for worse, has withstood the test of time. Our electoral process may not be perfect, but it is definitely the best way to make sure that every person in every state will have a voice free from the tyranny of the majority. I'll leave you with this quote by the Broadway superstar Alexander Hamilton. I venture somewhat further and hesitate to not affirm that if the manner of electing a president be not perfect, it is at least excellent. If you like this video, click the like button, comment if you agree or disagree. Also hit the bell icon to get notified of new content. And don't forget to subscribe. Thanks so much for watching, and God bless.